going to take a couple more. I've got Keith there.
Hi, just going around this issue of impartiality and routes and pathways. My name's Keith Herman. I'm a convener of the Career Sector Stakeholders Alliance. Rob, you mentioned in your presentation as well around informed choices in terms of a diverse range of routes and pathways for young people into further education, higher education and into employment. And there's a real issue there because the report talks a lot about destination measures, for example. But if you skew the destination measures to, for example, report the number of young people going to Russell Group universities, you therefore, I think, introduce possibly a bias in how schools are being measured again. And that then again disincentivizes schools to encourage young people to take the vocational route. So how do we go about, I guess, depoliticizing these issues and ensuring that young people can make proper informed choices?
Great. Second question. Lady there, please.
Hi, I'm Katie Theobald from 2020 Delivery. Kind of following on from that, it's great to have the destination measures, but I think Rob made a really good point that careers guidance has never really been a forte of our schools. So since we are at a position where there's something of a vacuum and more people filling it, what can we do to make sure we're actually identifying what works at this stage and promoting that so it doesn't become a box-ticking exercise in, yes, I do this, yes, I do that, but it doesn't actually give the outcome?
Great. Either of you want to tackle either of those?
Yeah, I mean, both of them really. I mean, the what works point is key really. So the CBI isn't claimed to be an expert on provision of careers advice, so we're looking at the outcomes really, and I think the outcomes show that something's not working. But it is important, and we like the whole thrust of education reforms in terms of passing more freedoms and flexibilities to schools. So we don't support a prescriptive approach, but it is important that somewhere we're capturing evidence of what works, and that would seem to be a natural role for the National Career Service. In terms of depoliticising the school system, I mean, we would absolutely agree. As Keith knows, we're arguing for quite systemic change in the education system that delivers not just academic rigour, but actually delivers rounded and grounded young people with a wide range of skills and behaviours that set them up for success both in work and in life. And within that context, it's essential that young people have the full range of options around the different pathways that are available to them. In terms of how we depoliticise, again, I think freedoms and flexibilities to schools is part of the solution, but I do think it's also about having that accountability framework that incentivises and rewards those schools that to provide that full and deep careers provision.
The Select Committee is very supportive of what the government's done on destinations data, and as is everybody else, but we're all conceptually in favour of it. Whether it's actually deliverable, let alone in a way that doesn't have biases built in, remains to be seen. It's possible in a free country that's simply impossible to get data that's going to be both meaningful and then could be used to hold schools to account. It could be that we're going up a cul-de-sac there, but good luck to the government in trying to make it work. How do we do more than a box ticking? Well, from where we are right now, a little bit of box ticking wouldn't go amiss. And if some schools had to at least show some effort at fulfilling their careers responsibilities, that would be a step forward. We think, and I think it seems everybody else does, that Ofsted have a role to play, but Ofsted visit an outstanding school with good academic result. It could be 6-7 years. The idea that Ofsted is the answer is you're asking the wrong question in this area. So that's why we feel there's a role for NCS coming in. It may not be all the time, the limits to it, but somebody with careers on their forehead sitting in the office of the head teacher having a chat about what they're doing is something that may not simply be happening right now, and we know that it's not there. So what I'd hope to see is that if the support can be put in there, the NCS would help broker support services into schools who need that bit of outside and external stimulus, and also play a certain amount of challenge as well. So it's not just about making sure they have some provision, but also about the quality of that provision. And if we can get the kind of data development going forward, not necessarily destinations, but data around careers service and provision, then in a way I think we can transform the landscape and move to a position where we have great careers advice for young and old alike.
Just on the point of data, I mean, I'm definitely the kind of person who kind of almost naturally wants more and more open data. I want, the latest new gadget online, I want to play with it immediately, and I'm very comfortable sharing my data. But I think there are some real risks around data in this area. Obviously, there's the kind of well-known risks around privacy, data protection, and often those are reasons why people don't want to share data, and they're given as a justification not to. I don't think that's satisfactory. I think those are challenges that can be dealt with and designed out. I think the actual risks around data are a bit more subtle. So I think that there is a big risk that if we do have more and more open data about the education system, especially around careers, then the kind of families and learners and young people who have all the advantages are the kind of, my hypothesis is they're the kind of families who are going to cement those advantages. They're going to make use of those data sources at the cost of, effectively, those families that don't know where to find out about the best schools or which courses are best or which activities are best. So I think the only way you can answer that is by researching it to find out if that's true, if I'm on the right track there. And if I am on the right track, I think you need to proactively help those who don't naturally use those data sources to make use of them, because you can bet that the majority of families who are making use are getting more and more and cementing some of those kind of existing advantages. So I'm going to take 2 questions from Twitter, if I may. We've got Janet College. She wanted to know, the makeup of destinations measures could skew advice. How can destination measures support the vocational route, which is something we've touched on already. And then Newell Hampson-Jones, he said that many of these recommendations, employers are passive or not in the lead. What could employers proactively do to help? So maybe let's ask you, Graham, on the first one around vocational route.
It's work in progress destinations data, and we need to make sure that it's both valuable and doesn't skew what happens. That's true. I'm not quite sure that you can design out the privacy issues in this area as easily as you think. I can't see that we're going to put a tag on every young person, so and they're legally obliged to tell us where they've gone and what they're doing. But we'll see. And the second question was.
So the second question was about more proactive roles for employers. My recommendations.
One simple thing: get to be a governor. I mean, you've got it in your report. Well, be a governor of your school. Would be of a local school. Well, and best of all, don't be a governor. I've ended up, terrible confession here, it's because they asked me, I've ended up with the governor of my children's school, and which is great. But I was
that must be terrifying for the other governors.
But I don't think I should. I think you want to find the school in the, if you want to do a bit from a social justice point of view in your community as someone running a successful business, well, try and find the lowest ranked school in your area and knock on the door and offer to be a governor. And you can start to develop, if you take your advice, you'll end up as the careers governor as well, and you'll use your network of local business people and start getting them in to come and talk to the kids about what they do. Exactly the sort of thing that Nick does, and I think step by step you'll make a difference.
Great.
Yeah, I think on that second point we'd probably challenge the question. I don't think employers are passive. I think businesses are engaging in schools in ever increasing numbers and in a wide variety of ways. So I touched on some of them sort of this morning, whether it's by going in to talk to young people, whether it's providing positive role models, whether it's getting them work ready through giving them some exposure to the realities of the workplace, whether it's by supporting the leadership team by transferring professional skills, whether it's supporting academies, whether it's setting up a UTC with a university. There's a whole variety of ways in which employers are engaging with schools. But it's certainly true that some employers don't know how to. So particularly for some of the SMEs and the smaller organisations, they struggle to know how to engage with schools. So there's certainly a piece of work around providing some resource and framework for some of the smaller employers to engage with schools. But there are a range of ways where individual employees can engage, whether it's through Inspiring the Future, whether it's through serving as a school governor. So there's a lot going on, I think.
Great. Should we take a couple more from the floor? I've got a lady there and Peter there. So this lady first.
Hi, I'm Lizzie Taylor and I'm a grammar school careers advisor in Kent. What I'm seeing on the ground is that these policies are very powerfully driving an increase in social inequality. And what I'd like to know is if policymakers are not interested in the social justice elements of this? Are they beginning to understand the economic consequences? I've written a paper which Careers England has published on the economic cost of government policies, and I really think, given what Louis was saying about the fact that people from private schools are having their provision continue but people from state schools aren't, that's an even further driver for social inequality. And what I'm interested in is, are policymakers waking up to the economic cost of that?
And then a question here from Peter, if you could, please.
Hello, I'm Peter Miller from Pearson. I'd like to ask the panel if there are any international high-performing countries that are doing things that are better that you would like to see implemented here in the UK, or in England specifically.
Okay, great. Anybody want to volunteer on those two?
Well, the economic cost, I think that's a really important point. I was discussing it with someone before we began, because if we can't get the government to move so far on the basis of what seem like to us pretty overwhelming arguments, we need to add to them. And I think we talked about it in our report, and I mentioned it today, this idea of the economic inefficiency. Just purely from an economic point of view, surely it's madness not to have decent signposting and information going on within the system. And the government has two main overriding educational objectives: one, to raise standards for all, and two, to close the gap between rich and poor. It's on accountability framework. It's enormously to the credit of the Secretary of State. He has listened, and shortly we will be getting the new accountability frameworks for schools, and I think they will give value to the academic performance of every child at the top and the bottom. I think that's going to be a breakthrough. So they do get it. I think, but as you say, at the moment, I see private schools with hearing one with 9 members of staff just on careers, and then you see what's going on in the state sector, where in fact, if you're not going on to university, which is complicated enough, and choices of the complication of those who are not going to university, which is the majority of the population, is infinitely greater and infinitely greater than it was a generation ago. How can you not see that? And how does that align with the genuine desire, utterly genuine desire, to close the gap and create a more socially just society, which I know ministers have?
It's genuine. It's genuine desire.
We've got some interesting stuff on that with the Russell Group admissions report out at the end of the month as well. Let's just say there's some very cosy relationships between certain schools and certain colleges and certain universities. Rob, did you have any comments?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important that we make the economic case alongside that social and moral case, because it can be quite persuasive. So, we've certainly done some research around the school system as a whole, which concludes that if we could raise standards in our schools to those of the very best in Europe, we could add 1% to GDP, which is, a nation-changing sum. So there's a really strong economic case, as well as the moral and social case for ensuring that every young person succeeds. And I know that Save the Children are doing some specific research on this issue that will be released soon, shortly. In terms of what we see overseas, there's some of the best performing systems in North America are of interest to us. So if you look at Alberta or some of the US states, there's some really interesting stuff around leadership, and that's about getting people from outside education into the education system, but also about getting teachers and professionals from within education into industry, maybe for a short term, to give them some real life experience of the realities of work and to help them do their job when they go back into school. So there's some interesting issues there that I think we're keen to explore within CBI.
Just on Peter's point around international evidence, it doesn't feel like anybody I've come across has kind of cracked it. Tony Watts did some good international work on kind of good examples of practice. The US in particular seems to have some quite kind of innovative uses of data and websites. And actually my Pearson colleagues over in the States have done a lot of work in this area. And often the terminology and the language is different, but some of the kind of challenges and solutions are very similar. So yeah, I think there are some lessons to be learned in particular from the States. So Tessa Stone in the corner there has publicly shamed me that I haven't asked anybody on that side of the room about their questions. So I'm going to ask the small but VIP group of people here if they have any questions, please. 2 there, great. Let's start with the lady at the front there.
I think someone on the panel said that the IAG provision in schools must be grounded in the realities of the labour market. And I wondered whether anyone on the panel had any practical suggestions around how we can get there.
Whereabouts are you from?
Centre for Skills Development.
Then let's take one. There's Tessa at the back of the question.
Thanks, Stuart. Tessa Stone from Brightside and the Bridge Group. Two quick points of information and one question. On your point about a framework for activity and intervention, the Bridge Group published a framework back in July on exactly that, and I would love to pick up a conversation with you about that, because I think we've mapped what employers and schools and universities can do. On the question of further research and the points that have been made about the independent sector, Tristram Hooley, Tony Watts and I currently have a bid in to the Sutton Trust to fund a piece of research looking specifically at best practice in the state sector and in the independent sector, so that we can add to the mound of evidence that's building up. And on that final point, my question, and it isn't a facetious one, Mr. Stewart, you describe this report as a wake-up call for the DFE. When are they going to wake up, and how do we make them wake up? We've had Bernardo's last week, this week, there's a Save the Children one next week. You know, the amount of money and professional time that we have all spent funding research and evidence capturing reports almost could have plugged that funding gap, I reckon. Can we stop wasting our time and money? We all know what the answer is. Can we get on and do it, and how?
Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, either of you want to take either of those questions?
The grounding of the labour market, I mean, the work that the Education and Employers Task Force did, showing the mismatch between what young people thought they were going to do and the realities of the labour market. Nick and I have talked about trying to have that, a local version of that and a national version of that pinned on every school notice board, on a careers board, and getting that out there, because just to challenge so many people can make so many decisions in complete blindness to the realities of what jobs there are out there, and so getting that out there is important. The NCS has an important. That's one of our reasons for looking at the NCS. It's, as I say, it's embryonic. It's relatively new, but it's building local labour market information, not leveraging that to inform people who provide careers advice and guidance in schools. Just simply seems mad. Duplicating it would be mad. Not using it would seem to me to be mad. How do we get the government? Well, I could point, surprisingly. I mean, the Secretary of State, some see as an unlistening ideologue, and I'd say that that's, if you look at the changes to examinations, that's disproved by that. He's actually listened, changed course, backed off the English baccalaureate certificates. We went on relentlessly about the accountability framework, the way it drives perverse behaviours. He actually was gracious enough to say it was thanks to our pushing that he's announced it. I think we will shortly hear that he's changed his mind on some of the elements of that. As well, I'm very optimistic. We've got a Secretary of State who wants to do good, does listen. The one area in which there's so far not been the slightest crack is this one. But I wouldn't be in politics if I wasn't. I'm an optimist. If you are right, and if you persist, and you keep going, how annoying it might be, eventually you will get there. And perhaps when we get the breakthrough, we will end up with, the opportunity with the NCS really made good into an all-age service is fantastic. We've had decades and decades of failure, and the opportunity is just there. The government could turn this into something which we're all frustrated with them into actually something which made you think, well, all credit to them. I'm trying everything I can at every level of government, from the Prime Minister down, to persuade them that this is the right thing to do.
But perhaps we will be that international case study of best practice at some point. Fingers crossed. A few words from you, Rob?
Yeah, just to add to what Graham said, in terms of how we bring that understanding of the labour market into schools, certainly up-to-date information is part of the solution, and UKCS provide labour market data. But it's also about getting employers involved, so no one understands the realities of the local labour market better than local employers, and not just what's needed today, but what's needed in 5-10 years' time. Which is why we think that what we're seeking to achieve won't work unless we really get employers involved. And in terms of the framework, very happy to have a conversation. We're doing some work in CBI around looking at the relationships that exist between business and schools generally and what works. So it'd be great to have a sign of what you're doing.
Great. We're going to take a couple of final questions and then you can go about your days. Anybody got burning question. We've got a lady here and a gentleman there. Let's go with them first.
Welcome the recommendation about the need for national, regional and local coordination. My name is Denise Bertucci from Unison, because this is something that's really, that's actually an underpinning problem for the career service. It's been obliterated, it's been smashed to pieces, it's been atomised, there's no consistency, there's no coherence. And are you going to take that on board, Graham?
Great, thank you very much. And then gentleman here.
Yeah, my name's Mitesh Bimjani from Success at School. I think there's been a lot of good stuff said today. I think the one thing that's been missing is that no one's really mentioned the parents' role in careers advice and careers services. So I think the school has a certain amount of expertise, and I think employers definitely have more to play. But I think a big influencing factor in decisions are the parents. How do we get the parents more involved?
Great. I'm going to leap in on that one, just because we did have a section on page 42 around parents and governors. So I guess we view parents and governors as kind of untapped resources. And again, if you contrast the picture in state schools with private schools are very good at making use of their networks of parents, very proactive using their governors. They know which governors are linked governors for careers. So I think there are kind of, on the one hand, it's a bit of a problem currently, but there's also an opportunity there. I think there are untapped resources that we can make use of. I guess on the kind of governor point, just to kind of segue slightly and steal kind of Chair's prerogative, I don't think we do disagree about governors and employers on boards as governors involved in careers. I guess one of our main findings from the first report was about the importance of careers being a strategic priority for the school. It should be one of the kind of governing kind of parts of the ethos of every school. And I think hopefully that governors can engage with that at that level. I definitely don't think they should be micromanaging, but I do think having governors actively engaged in thinking about careers at that strategic level is another kind of untapped resource, especially within state schools. Do either of you have any final comments?
Well, I was asked to take on board the need for coherence. Risk of repeating myself, I hope an increased involvement of the National Careers Service can do that. But where the seeming breakthrough on the NCS, though, if announced, comes with absolutely no more funding. Because I'm a great believer. I'm a Tory fiscal hawk, I'm afraid. I confess. I believe you can do more for less. I think lots of people have managed to show it. I'm not convinced that simply extending the NCS remit in its early embryonic days without any more money is the best way of providing the coherent, high-quality, non-box ticking, proper service that we want to see. So if make sure you're not fooled into thinking we have a victory because of a change in remit, but no real fundamental change in substance.
Rob, do you have any final comments?
I suppose it's just coming back to that point about parents, really, is that you're recognising that obviously parents have a huge role to play in supporting young people make career choices. Both a positive role but also a negative role. So again, coming back to that point about vocational pathways, most parents don't want their child to do an apprenticeship because it's seen as second class. So there's a real issue around how we brand some of those vocational routes, so the parents are more open-minded and encourage their children to explore those other routes. So it's an interesting point.
Any final words?
Well, on a positive front as well, we have record numbers of apprenticeships. The government has made moves. I worried when John Hayes was the minister. I said, don't start mainlining numbers, or we'll put quantity ahead of quality. He raised the minimum period to a year, which I know some people have sought to find ways around. Extend it to a year, but don't change the substance. Apprenticeships is growing in number and I think in quality, and I think there's the public perception. I don't know if I've got any data to back that up. Anyway, my purely anecdotal and personal view is that there is a greater public perception of the value of apprenticeships. You're seeing people like the big accountancy firms starting to offer them at 18. You're seeing older people, younger people. There's a real opportunity there, and we need to look after that brand. And that's certainly what I always emphasise to ministers. Let's not just make it about numbers. Let's make sure we keep raising the quality of apprenticeships. And only by raising the quality, ensuring that people do get real lasting success in life from it, will we convey to parents the importance of apprenticeships, and to see those very often on a par with what a degree can give you. In fact, very often rather better than what quite a lot of degrees give you.
Great. Any final words from you, Rob? Okay, that's a wrap. Sorry again about the late start. Thank you, everybody.